New episodes of the I Know You Didn't Ask podcast are out every Monday and Friday, available wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. Welcome to I Know You Didn't Ask. I'm your host, Megan O'Donnell, and if you know me, you know that I take hosting incredibly seriously. I'd like to say I am the hostess with the mostess, and it can be anything from a girls' night in, GNI, special Friday dinner, when I'm celebrating a personal milestone for me or my husband, whether it's for Mother's Day or Father's Day, a holiday, or most recently, this past weekend, I celebrated the holidays with a holiday dip party. So I came across this concept through the hilarious comedian Zack Noe Towers. And basically, you invite your friends and family over, and each person needs to bring a dip. Now, this dip can be savory, it can be sweet, it could be a little bit of both, but everybody needs to bring a dip. And on the invitation via Partyful, which if you guys aren't sending your invitations out through Partyful, then you're already not living in 2025, almost 2026, because it is of the future. But of course, you put in the information for the party, the dress code, festive chic, the address. We all know it, the times, understood. But we also had a little note that, of course, you're going to need to bring your own dip. But if you don't bring a dip, we are going to shame you. However, some of my guests are sick freaks, like my friend Nico, who has been on this here show many times. And he let me know the day before he will not be bringing a dip. And he does want to be shamed, but that is one of his kinks. So unfortunately, it wasn't punishment for him. He brings good times and lulls, so he didn't need to bring a dip. He was one of the few people who I could and will make exceptions for the rest of my life and the rest of his life as well. So, what is a dip party? As I mentioned, everybody brings a dip. But as the host, it is my responsibility to get all the accoutrements for the dips. Are we thinking a tortilla chip? Do we need a Ritz cracker? What are we dipping in dip? And of course, there are vegetables galore, but who eats the vegetables at a dip party? We're going to get into the accoutrements a little bit later and just, some pontifications on what I was finding about what was left over, which I think is a real tell about how society is behaving. This dip party was a bit of an anthropological study for me. I was looking to see, who brought more than one dip, who made their dip on premise, who didn't bring a dip. One interesting thing I saw was, what kind of dips do men make? And then there were the men with partners whose partner made all the dips, myself, or there was the single male. What kind of dip did he bring? So we will be digging into dips and again, all of my findings from this dip party in what I would call a post-mortem episode. We're going to be talking through all the details to really memorialize this and to also help you plan an incredible dip party for the future. So this will be coming out on December 17th. I mean, come on, you can't really host a holiday party this upcoming weekend. If you do, then you're just like a dirtbag. Like, you're really gonna now expect all your friends to come, prep a dip, figure something out. So I'm hoping that you plan a dip party for New Year's. If you were going to be planning a New Year's party, that's acceptable. I mean, we could do a dip party for MLK. I feel like he'd have loved a dip party in his prime. Of course, Galentine's dip. I do think that's actually a really great idea, because you know what, dip is a bit of an emotional crutch for me. So if I didn't have a husband, I would rely on dip on a holiday like Valentine's Day or Galentine's, if you will. Okay, so first and foremost, I am a Virgo through and through, OCD. I'm a list maker, full stop. I make lists for everything. And I also have this kooky way about me that I make lists and then I don't cross anything off the list. I do nothing on the list, but I know I have a growing list of items that I should be handling. However, when it came to the dip party, I was very on top of dip data, as I would call it. The spreadsheet on Google Sheets was titled Dip Data, and it was an absolutely integral part of hosting a dip party because it's important to be very aware of what your guests are bringing so there aren't dupes. We did have one dupe, but we will get there because certain dips you make exceptions for if you understand your guests and you understand the nature of what people are eating. in mass quantities. I'm one of those bitches who stares at what people eat at meals, whether it's at someone's home or at a restaurant. Like, I'm clocking everything people are putting into their mouths. And I don't know why it's not a becoming trait. I think it's because I probably am like a selfish eater. Like, I'm watching him eat so that I can take cues on when, Fatty McFat is done so I can now jump in. But you kind of have to read the room. So that is why I made one single exception to the double dipping situation. I did have to put my foot down on a possible dupe for a second dip, but again, we will get there. And I know I'm taking this very seriously, but in these trying times, which I love that phrase because it's like, isn't every moment of history considered a trying time? We just happen to have social media that is like showing like heinous things happening across the world, within minutes of it happening. So we're kind of inundated with like terrible things, but the world is always terrible. There will always be hate and terror and anger and psychosis that drive people mad. So as much as we're in a trying time right now, I try to find ways to have fun and bring people together, and also find ways to distract myself from, my dwindling bank account and the ever-present reality that I can possibly never be a homeowner. But that's besides the point. We're talking dip, people. We're not talking about the dips in my mental health. But this dip data spreadsheet was a work of art. There were three columns: guest, which is the guest's name, the dip that they will be bringing, as well as the preferred item to dip. I, as the host, again, I keep speaking in I statements because, my husband is a great man, but he's not prepping dips with me. That's not our relationship. He's like vacuuming the living room and taking out the trash, which is also an integral part of a dip party. And any kind of host, you need your partner in crime to do all the shit you don't want to do. So I can make a big mess in the kitchen and he just cleans it up before the guests come. But don't worry, we will be talking about prepping your home for a dip party because, again, I was not ready for every surface of my home to be covered in dip. Um, of course, with a gorgeous cotton tablecloth and then the dip on top. I don't do plastic tablecloth. Let's not be fucking crazy. By the way, I'm on video right now. If you're not watching on Spotify or YouTube, then you're doing yourself a disservice because I'm very cute. You could see my greasy hair. I threw it in a straightening iron this morning, and we're hoping for the best. I will say you can also see my beautiful Christmas tree behind me because, 'tis the season. It's a little larger than we expected, but you know what? Size does matter. And when it came to a tree, I feel like the more the merrier, right? The bigger the better. Let's just go for it. Anyways, whew, this is how you know I didn't like script out every minute of this episode because I'm talking about the Christmas tree. I'm talking about my financial woes. I'm just talking nonstop. But let's get into the spreadsheet. So, as the hostess with the mostest, you kind of have to come through with a few dips. So, of course, I had a Lipton onion dip. That is just a Lipton packet with onion dust, and you put it in a bowl of sour cream. And I will say that has been a go to dip of mine for years. But I was disappointed. I shouldn't say disappointed. I just was shocked that it wasn't as popular as expected. And I feel like the reason for that was because everybody pretty much created and made their own dips. So to have an artificial onion dust dip just in a bucket of sour cream didn't hit as much as it would at, let's say, another event with other appetizer options. But yeah, I did feel it fell flat, and I also feel like the vessel I put it in was a incorrect vessel. When you're plating your dips, you need to make sure that it also is visually exciting for your guests because a big tub of like tan sour cream isn't particularly appetizing. So the onion dip was a flop. We'll talk about leftovers later because the amount of onion dip that I made and now have left over is alarming. Like, I just don't know what to do with it, and I really try not to have any food waste in the home. So realizing that I'm going to be eating onion dip every meal for the next week has been harrowing. And you know what they say? A moment on the lips is a lifetime on the hips. I feel like this onion dip is going to live on my hips for the foreseeable future. Like it's going to stick with me for about 30 years. I have a sick feeling. And I also meant to say this dip party was inundated with dips. So I didn't even provide a cheese board. I had nothing but dip, nothing but net. And I think that's something that we need to, again, normalize. Not every party needs a charcuterie board. Not every party needs, a gorgeous fig jam with cheeses. This is dip and dip only. If you guys want cheese, go to another fucking holiday party, but not my dip party. This is strictly Diply. Okay, moving on. Then I made a spinach artichoke dip, Ina Garten's recipe. Absolutely fire, delicious, 10 out of 10. That's all I can say. No notes. If you want that recipe, hit me up at Megan the Podcaster on Instagram or TikTok Messenger, and I will send you the recipe because by golly, was that shit fucking good. We all were, Applebee's kids eating spinach and artichoke dip, but it felt serious to make it on my own. I felt like an adult. I felt like the woman I want to be and the woman I'm becoming. Then moving on to another Ina Garten recipe. I made all of Ina's dips from her book, Modern Comfort Food. And I've just had it for a while. So I thought, you know what? Why not double dip from the book? You should have heard the dumb dip comments that I've been hearing the past 2 weeks, but they were appreciated and I love my friends. Thank you so much for supporting me and my dip dreams. But I made a kielbasa with a hot mustard, and kielbasa is really easy. It's like a Polish sausage. You cut it in like nice little diagonals, and you have little toothpicks that you can obviously put into the hot mustard. But the hot mustard was divine. It was a grain mustard with a Dijon mustard, a mayo base, salt, pep, obviously, and the little key that made it hot was like maybe a teaspoon of horseradish. It was sublime. That dip has been carrying me again through some leftovers. The kielbasa didn't have many leftovers. I will say I saw Matt eating cold kielbasa on Sunday morning, and you know what? It was a long night. We all had some drinks. I was drinking NA beers, people, because I'm a beacon of health and wellness. I don't know if you heard, but I'm trying not to be hungover anymore, and it's actually doing wonders for me. Again, if you're watching on YouTube or Spotify, you'll see my skin is glowing, and you'll also see that my 11 lines have kind of gone away since I've been drinking more water and not boozing and like really leaning into like my SkinCeuticals ferulic acid, shout out to the best product ever. My 11 lines on my face like are kind of going away. So that's been like a great development again. 2025 is the year of realizing stuff, and I'm realizing that alcohol is literally a toxin. But anyways, moving on. The hot mustard was an absolute smashing success. I actually ended up taking that hot mustard leftover, and I've been eating it with a pot pie that I made with leftover turkey that I had from a turkey I made the weekend before. So we will find ways to continue to savor dip post-dip party because, as I said, we do not waste food or dip in this house, in this here home. Then I ended up getting a shrimp cocktail platter. We did have one person who's allergic to shellfish, but like I always say, sometimes someone needs to die for the rest of us to have a good time. Thankfully, no deaths at the party, but we had shrimp with shrimp cocktail. I did not make the cocktail sauce myself. I did go with store-bought, and I just had to accept that as my truth. I feel all parties need to have shrimp cocktail. I think it's incredibly important. And that's it. That's it. I also made a pig in a blanket. I didn't eat one single one. They are always a hot commodity at a party, and I really should have known. But I actually had a big, beautiful platter where I put the pigs in a blanket on one side, and then I put the kielbasa on the other. And I split the two with the dip trio. Obviously, a classic grainy mustard, a classic ketchup, Heinz, all day, every day. And then in the middle, I had that hot mustard with the horseradish. And again, smashing success. Both platters were just eaten up. I have to actually wait for my friend to send me the video footage of the of the party. He's actually, as of yesterday, an award-winning Oscar shortlist director. So he shot some of the footage of the dip party. I accosted him upon arrival and asked him to please do so, and haven't seen the rough cut. I will be asking people to send me, what they photographed and what they videoed, so I could put it on my TikTok. Megan the Podcaster, check me out. Okay, moving on. I had one other store-bought dip, but I only bought it in a moment of weakness because it is our favorite dip from our honeymoon. It is a salmon roe dip that we had in Greece. It's called Tara Masalata. It's kind of like this pinky salmony color, and it's just incredibly salty and savory, and it's just 10 out of 10 the best. I will say we'll get to some, you know, deeper layers of dip conversation later in the episode. But I did have multiple people tell me that was their favorite dip, and they asked me for the recipe, and I had to say it was store bought. That was hard. Ina Garten would not be proud of that. Okay, you guys, moving on. We have a Mexican corn dip, which was my favorite dip. We did a little bit of a vote at the end of the night. Who's your favorite dip? And this could be both savory and sweet. And I voted for the Mexican corn dip, a simple dip. It wasn't overly mayo based, which is so important with a corn dip. There was a cotija cheese, there was a little cilantro, there was onions. It was so simple. It was so good. 10 out of 10. There was a Wisconsin beer cheese, and this is not like Mama's beer cheese from Vanderpump Rules. This was like this mayo with a ranch packet and a cheddar cheese. The guest was from Wisconsin, and that's, I guess, what people in Wisconsin eat. And I have to say, absolutely slapped. Delicious cheese dip. Then we moved to a pimento cheese dip. Again, we have a lot of cheese-based dips, but we will get into some of the other options that we had later in this list in about 3 minutes. But the pimento cheese dip is always a classic. It's interesting because I myself was going to be making a pimento cheese dip. My sister-in-law, early on in the dip planning, data collection phase, was asking me if she could bring pimento. And I said, sorry, honey, someone already has claimed it. And that, as a dip party host, is going to be very difficult for you because you're going to need to be dealing with people in your life who want to, quote, double dip. And you have to know, as I said, when to acknowledge and when to accept two of the same dips at your dip party. Again, you have to know your audience. We didn't need two pimentos, let alone three. So we had one person make a gorgeous pimento cheese dip. The peppers in there were just perfect. And again, I'll talk about a little bit of, what we were dipping in these dips. Of course, we'll get there. Then we had a smoked trout dip. This is made by a friend who's very chic. She cannot just make a basic dip. It had to be a smoked fish dip. Absolutely smashing success. Delicious. We had a whipped green feta dip that had pine nuts and pistachios on top, and there was like this lemony zest on the inside. So good. Then that same person came out with a second dip. They had an olive tapenade with black olives. It's a New York Times recipe, and in a shocking turn of events, I believe that olive tapenade could have been possibly my favorite dip. I know I voted for the Mexican corn dip in the moment, but again, I was living in a dip paradise post-party where nobody was there to talk to me while I was eating dips. I wasn't running back to the kitchen to get a glass for someone. I was able to really focus on the dips, and I think the olive tapenade actually might have stolen my heart. It was an olive tapenade that I was putting on a baguette, and then you throw a piece of prosciutto on there. And the salt on salt action between the olive and the prosciutto was just sublime. I'm speechless. I'm speechless. Somehow I will find a way to talk for 20 more minutes, but I was speechless about how fucking delicious that was. There was a gorgeous hummus that my friend got from 12 Chairs, which is like a really fabulous restaurant in the city. It was creamy and silky. And what I love about hummus is that when the vendor sells the hummus with like a couple of whole chickpeas on top, I just love the crunch with the mush. I think that's very, very important. We had one person bring a healthy dip, a green goddess dip, which was a medley of gorgeous veggies, gorgeous green things. Didn't get too far into asking what was in it, but it was delicious. And that was exactly what I wanted to eat with a crisp radish or a crisp little colorful carrot, because we can't just have basic orange carrots. I needed a purple carrot. I needed a yellow carrot. accoutrements with the dip have a huge impact on, you know, the evening as well. I can't deny that. As I mentioned, we had one dip that two people suggested to bring, and I did again let it slide because everybody loves a buffalo chicken dip. And this was buffalo chicken dip done in two ways. Two ways. They were both obviously the same flavor profiles, but different enough to really distinguish between the two of them. And I have to say, I love buffalo chicken dip so much. It's just a crowd pleaser. I absolutely love, something that's gonna probably make my belly hurt. Like it didn't sit well the next day when I had it for lunch. I had it heated up and I did it to myself. I knew what I was doing. I knew what I was getting into, but I just fell back into old patterns. It's not my finest hour. So, you guys, those are the dips that we had. And I mean, I felt very confident and very happy with our dip selection. I just felt like there were a lot of different things happening. I guess, like in hindsight, again, I always am giving myself notes. I wish we had had like a ground beef dip or a 7-layer dip. I felt like those were kind of the dips that were really missing in my perspective. I felt like we really kind of ran the gamut on a lot of other kind of fabulous dips. I should mention, I also had a pico de gallo kind of salsa moment that I just kind of had in my fridge that I, threw into a bowl and called it a day. And then I also was intending on making guacamole for the group because I don't think that travels well. So, it has to be a host dip. But they didn't have any ripe avocados on the day that I went to the store. So, alas, no guacamole. And I was also supposed to be making a smoky eggplant dip from Andy Barangani. I'm butchering his last name. That was in Bon Appetit magazine, but I just didn't have the time. Which actually leads me to a suggestion, which is give yourself a little bit more time to make your own dips if you're the host. There's a lot going on when you're hosting. There's the cleaning, there's the prepping, there's the overall merriment with decor that you're needing to finalize in the house. But I would say yes, start a little earlier so that you don't make your first guests work. I put them to work. They showed up a little early. Good friends, lifelong friends, but they did have to get the wrath of Megan in OCD. Guests are coming in 45 minutes mode, and nothing's done. Not a single onion has been chopped. Again, not my finest moments, but that's okay. You guys, I'm jumping all over the place again. This is not my usually perfectly produced episode, but we're just having fun here today. This is a holiday fun bonus episode. But I have to say, we also had two sweet dips. We had one cannoli dip. And if you guys are familiar with the Venerios in the East Village, it is an old school Italian bakery. They are the best. They make a little tub of cannoli cream, and then they have a Tupperware of broken cannoli shells, and you dip the shells in the cream, and boom, I'm creaming. Like, I'm creaming like I'm in Unknown Number, the high school catfish. And that was one of the most delicious things I've ever had. And the other sweet dip that we had was an Oreo dip. And the Oreo dip was homemade, absolutely delicious. And the Oreo dip actually leads me to my biggest regret of the evening. Um, as I mentioned, the dip accoutrement kind of is at the same exact level of dips, and I'm lowering my tone, I'm lowering the energy because I forgot to buy the strawberries, which were the main accoutrement to the Oreo dip. So when you have a crowd of about 20 people clamoring for dip, dying for dip, and you realize that you have let one of your friends down who not only brought one dip, this particular guest who did come on the show to talk about her 14-step shower process. Again, I know you didn't ask, but we are telling you anyways. She brought 3 dips to the party, and yeah, I forgot to get the accoutrements for her sweet dip. I haven't been able to sleep for days because of it. Like, I'm struggling with my mental health because of the reality that I'm a bad friend and I let people down who I love. I've done pretty heinous things in 2025, and I'm going to continue with time, but it's really been weighing on me. So again, I made 35,000 lists, and that was one of the notes that I have on my list of things to talk about, lists, and more lists, but I didn't double check my dip data spreadsheet before I went to the grocery store on that Saturday morning, and that's how this oversight happened. So I am so sorry to my guest, Lindsay. You know who you are. Yeah, I'm just sorry. I'm not perfect. I'm trying every day to be better, be best, to quote Melania Trump. Trying to be my best, but it just falls up short time after time, year after year. Anyways, all right, let's talk about the other dip accoutrements because I need to get my pep and my step back after just acknowledging the hurt and the shame and guilt I feel. Okay, so I have this gorgeous large enamel tray from Le Creuset. It's like just the most beautiful thing. If you're interested in it, someone must have had a picture. I'll put it in my reel. But I made like a chip platter, and there was a million different types. Of course, we have tortilla chips. You need to have a scoop. You need to have just the circle version. You need to have the OG triangle. You need to have an array of tortilla chips. And I will say, I have so much chip leftovers at this point that I'm going to be eating nachos every weekend for the next 6 months. Then we need little pretzels, and I like the little pretzels that have like a little hatch look. It looks like a little window. Those are great for dipping, and those actually came into play with the Oreo dip. I said we can go salty and sweet, and it did work. It did get the job done, but again, it wasn't a strawberry. And okay, you guys, moving on. We then also had a Ritz cracker. Nobody opened them, and I felt like the smoked trout dip and the pimento cheese dip needed to be on a Ritz cracker, but nobody opened them. And I'm wondering if everybody was scared to open the things that weren't opened because I'm a scary person and I'm a drill sergeant and I'm a scary host if need be. So that was one thing that I'm really disappointed about, nobody enjoying buttery Ritz cracker. I will be saying, for the record, I will be making cod tonight with a rich cracker crumble on the top. So I will be, of course, reusing everything as per usual. We had some ruffles, of course. They do have ridges, and as you know, and ruffles just kind of go across the board with everything. I think a ruffle and an onion dip is just best friends for life. In a shocking turn of events, we had Frito Scoops, and they're larger than a real Frito. It kind of gave me the same sensation of like a shell, like a pasta shell that you would stuff with ricotta cheese and spinach or whatever. But it was a gorgeous dipping vessel for corn dip, onion dip, pimento cheese dip, all the dips. I will say, like, a corn chip obviously goes with a Mexican corn dip and the beer cheese, seamlessly, but I don't think I would have done a Frito scoop in a spinach artichoke. Call me crazy, but I don't think that's a good match. We, of course, had all of the usual suspects for the vegetables. There was a carrot, again, multicolored. We don't just do orange carrots in this house. We need to expand the horizons of our guests. We had celery. A very chic guest brought so many radishes, sliced with a mandolin, so incredibly thin. I will say, not a huge hit for the party. I am trying to figure out ways to now eat those radishes. Again, I'm doing like a very French radish with butter and a little sprinkling of fleur de sel on top to eat them. But I was very shocked that the radishes didn't go as fast as I would have liked. Of course, we had cucumbers, both circles and spears. We need options. Guests need options. It's just, again, like, I busy myself with all this bullshit instead of like actually doing the cooking. So when my lovely guest came a little bit early, I was putting them to work mainly with the fruit and vegetable why would I even bring up fruit? We all know I didn't bring any fruit. I hate fruit, so that's probably explains why it was a blind spot for me, but I'm still mourning, what could have been. What could have been strawberries dunked in Oreo dip. We had little pepper strips. Of course, we got a red, a orange, a yellow pepper. I'm not getting green peppers. Come on, people. We're not poor. We had snap peas and, the usual suspects on a vegetable platter, but like who's eating that? I will say people did eat them. I shouldn't say people didn't because again, I cleaned up all the leftovers and I ended up chopping up the celery leftovers and the carrots leftovers and put them into the pot pie that I made on Monday night. So reduce, reuse, recycle, people. Don't ever throw things out because why are we being wasteful? I will say I got 4 baguettes from Jed's Bread at the Montclair Farmers Market. Shout out to Jed, whoever you are. Your bread's gorgeous. But I found them to be incredibly undereaten. I didn't see a lot of people eating the bread, which was devastating because baguettes from a farmer's market are expensive. A quick $24 for 4. So I was disappointed in that, but thankfully, again, I reduce, reuse, recycle on a daily basis, and I was able to take the stale bread, throw it in my Vitamix, and make breadcrumbs, which again, I will be eating with the cod and the Ritz cracker breadcrumbs that I'm making. So I'm just literally Martha Stewart's protege. What else? A couple things I couldn't find. I wanted to get like little pretzel bites. When I was told that there was going to be beer cheese, I thought it was going to be like a Melty Mama's beer cheese, which I really felt like a little pretzel bite would have kind of been the perfect accoutrement for that. But it wasn't. That dip wasn't like that. So I didn't feel as terrorized by the fact that I couldn't really find pretzel bites. One shocking turn of events was I could barely find Stacy's pita chips anywhere at any of the stores I went to. And I wonder, has anybody checked on Stacy? Because it felt shocking that I was really having to go to literally 3 stores to find Stacy's pita chips, and I ended up finding them at Whole Foods on the bottom rack of the chips section. And we all know you pay for good placement in a grocery store. So they're not even at 2 different ShopRites that I went to, and you're on the bottom level of Whole Foods displays. Is everything okay, Stacey? Like, is there something you need to tell us? Because we are still trying to support you out here in the streets. Like, dip parties, like, run on Stacey's pita chips. Like, I was really alarmed by that. And I ended up making my own pita chips because, again, I am Martha Stewart's protege. So we did find a bag of Stacy's, and I did make my own pita because, again, pita is a gorgeous little dip for any and all dips on the list, except the hot mustard. You're not going to just dip a pita bread in hot mustard. But I digress. Anyways, I will say, we had some winners and losers here. I'm competitive, but I don't really care about winning. I just don't want to be dead last, But we only had everybody vote for the top 2 favorite dips. So if you're listening right now, I hope you've had some time to think about what you think your favorite dip would have been. But our dips actually ended up being a tie for the smoked trout dip and the Oreo dip. So it actually ended up working perfectly because we had a sweet winner and a savory winner, but naturally we needed more confirmation. So we did a sudden death vote where everybody had to vote between the trout dip or the Oreo dip. And in a shocking turn of events, we had yet another tie. It was both 50-50, so we gave up at that point. There had been a lot of red wine and merriment happening, so none of us are really giving too much of a shit at that point. So we had 2 winners, the trout and the Oreo. Mazel tov to you ladies, both guests on this here show. Just such a great win to lead into the holiday season. I will say we had some location issues because my apartment is tiny, so the amount of dip and people and dippers dip accoutrement was like overflowing. Like there was so much dip, and I had one guest say, quote, I was awestruck walking into the living room and seeing the giant platter of different dipping vessels. And that was something I wanted for guests to feel. I wanted them to feel the barrage of dip and dip accoutrement. I think that's important. Abundance is very important at parties because there's nothing worse than like getting in the car after a party and saying, like, do you want to go to McDonald's? Because that party had the shittiest food ever. Like that will just never happen for me. Another quote that I received when I was fishing for information from my guests about their thoughts and feelings on the event was, quote, all in all, it was my second favorite Saturday of the year, second to only my wedding. And my favorite Friday of the year was your wedding, obviously. But those are my top 3 days. So I've been a part of this person's 3 days, one of which being the dip party. So if you're considering hosting a dip party, like I said, Galentine's, New Year's, holiday parties are done this year. So if you're throwing one on your friends' calendars, you're very, very fucking selfish. Like, it's done. Like, you cannot throw a dip into the mix with your friends this late in the game. Christmas is in a few days. We're currently in Hanukkah. Like, come on, relax, you selfish fucking host. But you could possibly make someone's top 3 days of the year. It shows you what a dip day could be for your friends. This is number two in her life. This is huge. Like, I changed her life. We changed her life. I will say I spoke with my husband quickly just to get some sound bites from him. And didn't give me what I was looking for. Again, like, I'm looking for hot tea. Like, I'm also looking for like some negatives. Like, I'm obsessed with like being negative, like leaning negative. Um, One friend said one of the worst parts about the evening was that it happened to be SantaCon in Manhattan that day. So being on New Jersey Transit to get to our apartment required them to be near a bunch of drunk Santas, which is pretty much a fucking assault on your senses. Seeing, hearing, smelling, like, it's just all bad. So I did apologize to a few guests for that reality. Yeah, I spoke to my husband. He said, quote, "I'm so grateful that you planned this event to bring us all together." Are you kidding me? And then my follow-up was, let's get more malicious. And he said, quote, "I don't have that." He is so lucky to have me. Oh my God. Oh my God. Another quote from him was about the evening was that he said, the quote, "The Knicks game that night brought us to the NBA finals, which was so good." So again, like, no comments about Dip. Um, we're gonna be fighting tonight about this. It's still fresh. Once I edit this episode in an hour, it's gonna all come back to me, and I'll pick a fight, just for funsies. But I will say, this party was so much fun. And I feel like in the post-pandemic world, like, this physical presence of having friends and family being together is so special. I feel like it's more and more rare as you get older, as you start to have children, and as your priorities change in life. And so for me, I'm kind of at this precipice in my life where we don't have kids. Some of our friends are starting to have them. Some of our family is starting to have them, and part of me is clinging on to this time in our life and making sure these parties exist and will exist for years to come too. When we have children, I'm just gonna have them upstairs while we still have lots of dip happening downstairs. I think parties in general are kind of like a guaranteed respite from the pressures of life and work and your relationship and all the bad shit happening, and it's kind of like a safe place for everybody to collectively disconnect from everything. Also, just your devices, and talk to one another. Like, being at a party kind of means you're not going to be sitting on your phone and scrolling. You're going to be talking with people. You might meet a guy that you really are into. You might reconnect with an old friend. You might meet somebody and say, "You fucking are weird. Like, don't ever talk to me again." Like, there's so many things that come from parties and bringing people together. And I will say, hosting is expensive. This shit cost me a lot of money for all this crap that I bought. I went to Home Goods. I bought a specialty candle. You can't help buy a specialty candle for your party. But, I bought cute napkins, and I had all these beautiful tablecloths that I've been collecting over the years. Like, parties are very expensive, and that is not something I'm not aware of. But for me, I find it to be incredibly rewarding to bring people together, to have fun, to laugh with my friends. And even as I've gotten older, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm trying to like drink less and not be like a drunk slut all the time. Uh, like, even realizing that this party was kind of like a ground zero for me to kind of like see how I can be without drinking a lot. I had a couple beers, whatever, a glass of champagne, but wasn't like aggressive consumption. And I kind of noticed, like, wow, actually, I love being with my friends and communicating with them and having genuine conversations and not looking for that next distraction, whether it's, a puff of this, a drink of this, or this, or this, or this, or this. So, as I've gotten older, it's like finding different ways to connect with people and finding that, like, maybe it's not as fun to get like completely wasted all the time. Like, there's a time and a place for that, and it just like wasn't my little dip party. So I'm very proud of myself for making conscious decisions that are good for me, good for my health, and good for my wallet, because booze is fucking expensive too. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. Again, I know this is like the definition of I know you didn't ask, but I'm telling you anyways. But I'm hoping you host your own dip party. And if you do, please let me know what your theme is. If you need help planning or prepping it, again, please reach out to me. I've got nothing on the docket. I quite literally have no jobs coming up in the new year. Money's tight as I talk about spending hundreds of dollars on candles and dip, but again, savings are for a reason, right? Like I'm saving for a rainy day. This rainy day just happened to be my dip party. But thank you so much for listening. I hope you plan your own dip party. I hope this was just like a fun, dumb thing. I promise we have tons of great episodes on the horizon. Be sure to tune into Fridays with Love Megan holiday special. I'm hoping this bitch talks about dip in the episode. But if not, I'm going to find a way to bring it back to dip party as I always will and I will continue to do. Thank you, Zack Noe Towers, the awesome comedian who inspired this party. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have a refrigerator full of leftover dip that I will be eating for the next 2 days. Yes, I keep leftovers for a very long time. Just get the fuck over it, people. Am I right? Am I right? Thank you for listening. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll chat on Friday. Bye. New episodes of the I Know You Didn't Ask podcast are out every Monday and Friday, available wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube.